My name is Vanessa Carlisle. I'm 34 years old. And I didn't realize how fast a life can go quiet until the person you love weaponizes silence like it's a right. It started with a sentence that shouldn't have mattered. Stop acting like my mother. I can do whatever I want. He said it like he'd been saving it, like it wasn't just frustration. It was a line rehearsed in his head until it felt justified. And the worst part was how calm he sounded when he said it. Not shaking, not shouting, just certain, like my concern had become a crime. Ethan Caldwell and I had been together for 5 years. 3 of those years we lived together, building a life in the way couples do when they think they're past the messy part. The apartment was in both our names. The bills weren't equal, though. I paid about 70% of everything. Not because he forced me, not because I was naive, because he was still paying down student loans, and I told myself this was what partnership looked like. One person lifts a little more when the other is catching up. I didn't mind. Not until the imbalance stopped being financial and started being emotional. For weeks, Ethan had been elsewhere, physically present, sure, his keys in the bowl, his shoes by the door, his hoodie draped over our dining chair like a lazy flag claiming territory. But his attention was always just out of reach. Late nights with the guys. Phone always face down. Answers that were technically answers but never felt like the full truth. How was your day? I'd ask. Fine. Where'd you go after work? Just out. With who? Friends. And if I pressed even a little, his shoulders would tighten, like I'd pulled a thread he didn't want touched. So I stopped pulling. I told myself everyone goes through phases. Stress at work, the season changing, the dull ache of routine. 5 years is long enough for life to stop sparkling every day. But still, my body noticed. The way he kissed me less like a habit and more like a task. The way he'd laugh at his phone and tilt the screen away without thinking. The way he'd say, I'm tired, but stay up late scrolling, thumb moving, like he was searching for something he couldn't find in our living room. Then Friday morning came. I was in the kitchen making coffee. 2 mugs, without even thinking. Muscle memory. Love memory. Ethan came out of the bedroom with an overnight bag. Not a backpack, not a gym bag, an overnight bag. He didn't look at me at first. Just moved like he wanted to be out the door before the house could ask questions. Going somewhere? I asked, keeping my voice light. Casual, normal. He paused like my words were an inconvenience. Guys' weekend, Ben's place, he said. Oh, I blinked. You didn't mention it. I'm mentioning it now. His tone sharpened at the end, defensive in a way that didn't match what I'd said. I held my mug with both hands, feeling the heat through the ceramic. Okay, when will you be back? Sunday night. It was the kind of answer people give when they want you to stop asking. I tried again gently. Do you want me to feed Miso? Miso was his cat. Technically, Ethan adopted him before we met. But 3 years of living together does strange things to your heart. That orange little menace had become part of my routine, curling against my legs when I brushed my teeth, screaming for treats like he paid rent. Ethan shook his head. He'll be fine. Until I get back, he didn't say it. The omission hung there anyway. I watched him sling the bag over his shoulder, waited for the goodbye kiss, the quick squeeze of my waist, the love you muttered like punctuation before leaving. Instead, he opened the door. Ethan, I said before I could stop myself, not accusing, just reaching. He turned halfway. What? The word was sharp enough to cut. I swallowed. Have fun. He stared at me for a second like he was deciding whether fun was even allowed in my presence. Then he left. The door clicked shut. And the apartment felt different, like it exhaled, like it had been holding its breath around him. I stood there with 2 mugs of coffee, one of them pointless now. Miso jumped onto the counter and sniffed the empty space where Ethan had been. Yeah, I whispered, me too. Friday passed. I didn't text right away because I refused to be that girlfriend, the one who can't let a man breathe for a weekend. I wanted to prove, to him, to myself, that I could give space without shrinking. By Saturday morning, the silence felt less like space and more like a wall. So I sent one message. Hope you're having a good time. Miso's mad you're gone. He knocked over your succulent. It was light, harmless. A little joke, a little tether that said, I'm here. No response. Saturday afternoon, I looked at my phone more times than I want to admit. Each time I told myself the same thing. He's busy. He'll answer later. It's fine. Saturday evening, I called. Straight to voicemail. I stared at the screen after the call ended, listening to the quiet hum of our refrigerator like it was trying to soothe me. Sunday morning, I tried again. Voicemail. The rational part of my brain tried to build explanations like scaffolding. Maybe his phone died. Maybe they drove somewhere remote. Maybe he's just unplugging. But there's unplugging, and then there's disappearing. And in 5 years, Ethan had never disappeared on me like that. Sunday afternoon, he finally called. I answered so fast I didn't even let it ring twice. "What's up?" he said. No apology. No, "Hey, sorry." No warmth. Just what's up, like I was the interruption. I steadied my voice. I was worried. I texted yesterday. I called a few times. His exhale was loud, exaggerated. "Why are you blowing up my phone?" I blinked. I texted once and called twice in 2 days. "That's blowing up my phone, Vanessa. I'm with Ben. I'm allowed to have time with my friends without checking in every 5 minutes." The way he said allowed made my stomach twist. "I'm not asking you to check in every 5 minutes," I said carefully. "But disappearing completely for 2 days without a single message, that's not normal for us." There was a pause, then he laughed. Short, humorless. Normal for us or normal for what you think we should be? I gripped my phone tighter. "Ethan, what's going on?" "Nothing's going on." His voice went colder. "I'm just tired of feeling like I have to report to you every time I leave the house. It's suffocating." That word again. Suffocating. Like my love was a hand around his throat. "I don't make you report to me," I said. "I expect basic communication when you're gone for days." "See that?" he snapped. "That right there. You expect. You always expect something from me." "Yeah," I said, and my voice shook despite my effort. "I expect my boyfriend to let me know he's alive when he disappears for a weekend." Silence. Then, quieter, sharper. "Stop acting like my mother. I can do whatever I want." My chest went hot. I didn't even know what to say at first, because the insult wasn't just the word, it was the intention behind it. He wasn't defending his weekend. He was attacking my right to care. "I'm not doing this right now," he said. "I'll be home when I get home." And then he hung up. Just like that. A deadline. A blank screen. A sudden emptiness that felt like a door slammed inside my ribs. I sat down on the couch without thinking. Miso hopped into my lap like he'd been waiting for me to crack. And something clicked. Not the dramatic kind of click. Not a villain reveal. A quiet internal shift. This wasn't about one weekend. This was about distance. Manufactured distance. The kind that comes when someone wants out but doesn't want to be the bad guy. So they provoke you into reacting. So they can point and say, "See, this is why I can't." I stared at the wall across from me, at the faint outline where Ethan had once hung a framed photo of us. We'd taken it at a wedding 2 years ago, laughing so hard our eyes had crinkled. He'd moved it last month for redecorating. He never put it back. Monday morning came. The bed was still made on his side, his pillow untouched, his toothbrush still dry. I texted once, "Are you coming back today?" 3 hours later, he replied, "Yes, probably tonight." Probably. That word was the final straw because it wasn't just vague. It was careless. And in that moment, standing in my quiet apartment with Miso weaving around my ankles like a question mark, I realized something that made my throat tighten. If I stayed here waiting for him to come home, waiting for an apology, waiting for honesty, I was going to spend the rest of my relationship negotiating for basic respect. And I was too old and too tired for that. I walked into the bedroom, opened my closet, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was about to beg. I felt like I was about to pack. I didn't start packing like a person in a movie. No sobbing into a suitcase, no dramatic throwing of hangers, no rage-fueled ripping of framed photos off the wall. I packed the way I handle everything that scares me, quietly, precisely, like a checklist. Because if I turned it into a scene, I would have to feel every second of it, and I wasn't ready to drown in that kind of feeling. I was ready to move. I opened a drawer and folded my shirts with the same methodical care I used when we first moved in, when I thought we were building something permanent. Back then, I labeled boxes and color-coded the kitchen. Ethan teased me for being too organized. Now I realize something bitter. He only liked my structure when it served him, when it saved him, when it made life easier. But the moment my structure asked for the smallest thing in return, basic communication, he called it control. I pulled my suitcases from under the bed. Miso sat in the doorway, tail flicking, watching me like I'd betrayed him personally. "I'm not leaving you," I told him softly. "Not unless I have to." His eyes narrowed anyway. I started with what was undeniably mine. My clothes, my shoes, my work laptop, my books, half of them still marked with sticky notes from grad school. The other half, the self-help titles I read when Ethan first started pulling away, convinced there had to be a right way to love someone without losing yourself. My jewelry box. Then the bigger things. The TV in the living room. I bought it after my promotion last year, a small celebration gift to myself that Ethan quickly claimed as our TV. The coffee maker. I'd owned it long before Ethan ever lived with me. It had followed me through 3 apartments, 2 heartbreaks, and 1 year where I survived on caffeine and stubbornness alone. My kitchen equipment, my chef's knife set, my cast iron skillet, the blender I used for morning smoothies when I was trying to believe I could fix my stress with kale. My tools. That part always surprised people, like women can't own a toolbox without it being a quirky personality trait. But I grew up with a father who taught me the difference between a Phillips head and a flathead before he taught me algebra. And when you've learned how to tighten a loose hinge yourself, you stop tolerating doors that don't close properly. I moved room by room, taking only what was legitimately mine, but making sure I took all of it. I left Ethan's things untouched. His clothes, his shoes, his gaming console, the stupid decorative sign his sister gave us that said, "Home is where the heart is," in cursive script I always hated. I left Miso's supplies. I left the couch we'd bought together because fighting over a couch felt like the kind of petty that stains your soul. But I did take the TV console it sat on, because that was mine, and I was done sacrificing what belonged to me just to make someone else comfortable. By late afternoon, the apartment looked wrong. Not empty exactly, but unbalanced, like a place where someone had lived and then vanished. The corners of rooms were suddenly louder. The gaps where my things used to be felt like accusations. The living room had become sparse and mismatched, like a college kid's first place. A lamp on the floor instead of the end table it once sat on. A blank wall where my bookshelf had been. A bare kitchen counter where the coffee maker used to live. And in the middle of it all, Miso pacing like he was counting the losses. I set my last box by the door and stood in the kitchen, staring at the counter. That's where the note would go. I didn't want to write something long. I didn't want to explain myself like I was begging for him to understand. He understood. He just didn't care enough to act like it. So I wrote what he'd handed me, and I handed it back. "You're right. You can do whatever you want. So can I." I left it on the counter beside his keys bowl because I wanted him to see it the moment he came home. I wanted him to understand immediately that his silence had consequences. Then I looked around one last time. This apartment had been our adult life, our proof of stability, our shared lease, our shared future. And yet, standing there, I realized something sharp enough to sting. I had been paying 70% of the bills, but I'd been carrying 100% of the emotional labor lately. I locked the door behind me, and I didn't cry in the hallway. Not yet. I drove to my best friend Hannah Pierce's place with my car packed full. Hannah lived across town in a small house she'd inherited from her aunt, a place with creaky floorboards, warm lighting, and the kind of blunt honesty that makes you feel safer just by stepping inside. When she opened the door and saw my car loaded down, her face changed. "Van, what happened?" "I can't talk about it yet," I said, and my voice came out thinner than I intended. She didn't push. That's why she was Hannah. She just stepped aside. "Okay, come in." I unloaded boxes into her spare room. She helped without questions, only occasionally glancing at me like she was memorizing my expression for later when I finally broke. By the time everything was inside, it was dark. I sat on the edge of her guest bed and stared at my phone. No new messages. No calls. For a second, a sick part of me wondered if Ethan would even notice. Then, as if my thought had summoned it, my phone buzzed. Ethan calling. I let it ring. It buzzed again. I let it ring again. A third time. Then a fourth. Each vibration felt like a different emotion trying to climb up my throat. Anger, fear, hope. Stupid, humiliating hope. Then the sharp return of pride. I put my phone face down on the bed the way he always did, and I didn't answer. Tuesday morning, I went to work like nothing was happening. That was the strangest part. How your world can be cracking open and yet you still show up in an office, answer emails, drink coffee, pretend your insides aren't screaming. At around 10 a.m., my phone started lighting up again. Call after call. By noon, he'd called 8 times. 8. The man who couldn't send one text in 3 days suddenly had all the time in the world. During lunch, I finally texted him back. "I'm at work. What's up?" His response came immediately, like he'd been hovering over his phone this whole time. "Where's all your stuff?" I stared at the message. Not "are you okay?" Not "can we talk?" Not even "why did you leave?" Just "where's all your stuff?" Like I was a thief. Like I'd stolen from him, instead of reclaiming myself. "I took it," I typed back. 3 dots appeared. Then, "You took everything. What the hell, Vanessa?" I inhaled slowly, forcing calm into my fingers. "I took my things. Your things are still there." Another instant reply. "Why would you do this? This is insane. You moved out because I wanted space for a weekend." There it was. The rewrite of history. He didn't disappear for 3 days. He wanted space, and I dramatic, emotional, unreasonable, couldn't handle it. I felt something in me go still. Not numb, focused. I moved out because you disappeared for 3 days without communication and told me I was acting like your mother for expecting basic respect. Silence. No typing dots. Then, I never said you were acting like my mother. My jaw tightened. Of course. He didn't say it. He said it, but he didn't say it. I didn't respond to that. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't want to play the game where he controls reality by denying obvious truth. I put my phone away and finished my workday, hands shaking only once when a coworker asked me if I wanted to join them for coffee. No, I said too quickly. I'm just busy. Busy holding myself together. That evening, I returned to Hannah's house. My phone had 6 missed calls from Ethan. Hannah didn't ask questions when I came in. She just handed me a glass of water and watched me drink it like she was making sure I stayed human. Then, around 8:15 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Not loud, not polite, urgent. Hannah looked through the peephole and her eyebrows lifted. Vanessa, she said carefully, he's here. My stomach dropped so fast I felt it in my knees. He what? Hannah turned to me, voice low. Ethan, outside, and he looks mad. I stood frozen in the hallway, because suddenly the whole story wasn't just in my phone. It was at the front door, demanding to be dealt with. Hannah tilted her head. Do you want me to tell him you're not here? I should have said yes. I should have protected myself. But something in me, some need to see him face to face, to make him understand this wasn't a tantrum, made me shake my head. No, I said quietly. I'll talk to him. I walked to the door, heart pounding. And when I opened it, Ethan was standing on the porch with his arms crossed, eyes sharp, jaw tight. Not guilty, not apologetic. Just cornered. Can we talk? He asked. But his tone didn't sound like a request. It sounded like a demand. We didn't talk inside. That was the first boundary I set without even meaning to. I stepped onto Hannah's porch and pulled the door closed behind me, leaving the warmth of her house on the other side like a line I refused to let him cross. Ethan noticed. His eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. Can we talk privately? He said. This is private enough, I replied. A beat passed. Cars whispered by at the end of the street. A porch light buzzed overhead. Normal life continuing, completely unaware that something important was breaking in slow motion on Hannah's front steps. He exhaled sharply. Fine, let's walk. We moved to the end of the driveway, the space where conversations happen when people don't want witnesses but don't deserve comfort either. He crossed his arms again, a familiar posture. Defensive, protective, like he was bracing himself for an attack instead of acknowledging he'd caused damage. You can't just move out, he started. We live together. We have a lease. I know, I said calmly. Both our names are on it. I'll keep paying my share until it's sorted. His eyes narrowed. Sorted how? I shrugged. However it needs to be. Lawyers, buyout, sublet. We'll figure it out. He stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. You're talking like this is already over. I met his gaze, because it is. That landed. I saw it hit him, not as pain, but as disbelief, as if he genuinely thought this was all a dramatic pause before I came crawling back to normal. You're blowing this way out of proportion, he said. I wanted one weekend. One. And you turned it into this whole thing. This thing happened because you vanished for 3 days, I said. And when I asked if you were okay, you told me I was suffocating and acting like your mother. I didn't say that, he snapped instantly. Too fast. Too rehearsed. You did? I said you were treating me like I had to report to you. That's not the same thing. I nodded slowly. I don't care about the exact phrasing, Ethan. I care about the message. You turned concern into control so you didn't have to answer questions. He scoffed. So now I'm not allowed to have space? You're allowed space, I said. You're not allowed disappearance. That's your opinion. No, I replied quietly. That's what a partnership is. His jaw tightened. You're acting like I cheated on you. I watched his face as I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since Sunday. Where were you this weekend? He didn't hesitate. At Ben's. I tilted my head slightly. What's his address? It was subtle. Just a half-second pause. But it was there. Why does that matter? He asked. Because if you were actually there, I said, you wouldn't have to think about it. His eyes hardened. You don't trust me? I didn't soften it. Not anymore. That seemed to shock him more than anything else I'd said. You're really going to do this? He said. After 5 years? I didn't start this, I replied. I just stopped ignoring it. He dragged a hand through his hair, pacing once, then turning back to me like he was trying a new tactic. I was venting, he said. I was stressed. Ben and I were talking about life, relationships. I needed to not be tethered to my phone for 2 seconds. For 3 days? I asked. Yes, is that so terrible? No, I said. What's terrible is coming back and acting like I'm unreasonable for being worried. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. So I pushed. Call Ben, I said. Right now. Put him on speaker. His shoulders stiffened. I don't have to prove anything to you. You're right, I said, and felt a strange calm settle over me. You don't. He blinked. Then why are you asking? Because I needed to know if you would, I said. And now I do. Something shifted in his expression. Not guilt, not sadness. Fear. Fear that he was losing control of the narrative. I just needed space, he said again, softer now. That's all this was, yeah. And you got it, I replied, permanently. Vanessa, I stepped back. Not dramatically, just enough to signal the end. There's nothing left to talk about, I said. You made it clear how you feel. I'm respecting that. He laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. By abandoning me? By leaving a situation where I'm made to feel like the villain for caring, I said. Yes. His eyes finally filled, not with tears yet, but with something close. I messed up, he said quietly. I should have communicated better, but you don't just leave someone you love over one bad weekend. It wasn't one bad weekend, I said. It was weeks of distance. It was 3 days of silence. It was you attacking me for being concerned. It was a pattern. There is no pattern, he insisted. You're making this bigger than it is. I looked at him steadily. Then where were you? At Ben's, he repeated. Call him. He didn't move. Didn't reach for his phone. Didn't argue. Just stood there, staring at me like he was hoping I'd blink first. That was my answer. I turned and walked back toward Hannah's house. Vanessa, he called after me, his voice breaking for the first time. Please. I didn't stop. He followed me to the driveway, calling my name again, louder this time. Neighbors' lights flicked on in nearby houses. I opened the door, stepped inside, and closed it. The sound wasn't loud, but it was final. I leaned against the door, heart hammering, breath shallow. Hannah didn't say anything. She just stood a few feet away, arms crossed loosely, eyes kind. That was hard, she said gently. I nodded. Yes, I whispered. It was. But it was also the first moment in weeks where I felt like I could breathe. 2 days passed. No calls. No texts. I wondered, briefly, if he'd finally decided to give me the space he'd demanded. Then, on Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something in my chest told me this wasn't random. I answered. It's me, Ethan said. My stomach tightened. How did you get this number? I'm calling from Ben's phone, he said quickly. He's here. He wants to tell you I was with him all weekend. I closed my eyes. Of course. He's on speaker, Ethan added. Go ahead. And then Ben's voice came through, too casual, too eager. Hey, Vanessa. Yeah, Ethan was here Friday through Monday. We had a guy's weekend. Watched movies. Ordered food. Just hung out. Thanks, Ben, I said. There was a pause. Then I asked the question that had nothing to do with where Ethan was, and everything to do with whether anyone was telling the truth. Was Ethan's phone working the whole time? Silence. Not static. Not cutting out. Just silence, because no one had planned for that question. The silence stretched. Not long in seconds, maybe 3, maybe 4, but long enough to feel like a confession. Ben? I prompted gently. I don't want to get in the middle of this, he said, his voice suddenly quieter, careful. You already are, I replied. Ethan put you there. Another pause. I could almost picture it. Ben looking at Ethan, Ethan staring back, both of them silently negotiating what version of the truth would hurt least. Was his phone working? I asked again. Ben exhaled, slow and audible. I'm going to hand the phone back to Ethan. The line shifted, and suddenly Ethan was there, his voice hard, defensive, stripped of its earlier pleading. Are you satisfied now? I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. You said you disappeared because you needed space, not because your phone mysteriously stopped working for 72 hours. I told you my phone was working, he snapped. I just didn't want to be on it constantly. For 3 days. Yes. And you expect me to believe that's normal? You're paranoid, he said. You always have been. This is why I didn't want to tell you everything. You blow things out of proportion. There it was. The flip. The accusation. The attempt to make my reaction the problem instead of his behavior. If nothing happened, I said evenly, why did Ben refuse to answer a simple question? Because you were interrogating him, Ethan shot back. You were trying to trap him. No, I said. I was trying to confirm whether the story made sense, and it doesn't. You can't let anything go, he said. You have to control every detail. I laughed once, quietly, surprised by how hollow it sounded. I moved out. How is that control? There was a beat of silence on his end. Then his voice dropped, cold and final. I can't do this anymore. You're exhausting. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Then we're on the same page. He hung up. I stared at my phone for a long moment. Then I blocked both numbers. Ethan's and Ben's. It felt less like revenge and more like hygiene. Like finally washing my hands after touching something that made my skin crawl. Friday evening, I came home from work to find Ethan sitting on Hannah's porch. Hannah stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression apologetic. He's been here for about 2 hours, she said quietly. I didn't know what to do. It's okay, I said. And I meant it, because something had changed. Ethan stood when he saw me, relief flashing across his face like he'd been holding his breath. We need to talk about the apartment, he said. And Miso, and the lease. Talk to my lawyer, I replied, unlocking the door. He stared at me. You hired a lawyer? Yes. For a lease buyout? Yes. His voice rose. You're really doing this? You're throwing away 5 years over one argument? I turned to face him fully. It's not one argument. It's you disappearing, lying about where you were, and calling me controlling for noticing. I wasn't lying, he insisted. I was at Ben's. And when I asked Ben to confirm your phone was working, he refused to answer. That doesn't mean anything. It means everything, I said. Either he was lying for you, or you were lying about what happened. Either way, I don't trust you anymore. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the porch like a caged animal. Fine, he snapped. You want the truth? I waited. I wasn't at Ben's the whole time, he said. I went to a concert Saturday night. My chest tightened. With who? A woman from work, he said quickly. Just a friend. Her name's Lena. There it was. The missing piece. And you didn't tell me because? I asked. Because you'd react exactly like this, he shot back. You'd interrogate me, assume the worst, make me feel guilty for having female friends. Have I ever done that? I asked quietly. He opened his mouth, closed it. You hid it, I said, because you knew it crossed a line. It didn't cross a line, he said. Nothing happened. That's not the point, I replied. You lied. You ignored me for 3 days to avoid explaining yourself. And then you tried to convince me I was crazy for not trusting you. He shook his head, frustrated. I came here to apologize, to fix this, but you clearly don't want that. I don't want to be with someone who thinks honesty is optional, I said. Then fine, he snapped. I'll be out of the apartment by the end of the month. You can have it. I don't want it, I said. It has too many memories of trusting someone who didn't deserve it. That landed harder than anything else I'd said. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. No goodbye. No apology. Just the sound of his footsteps fading down the sidewalk. 6 weeks passed. The lease buyout was messy but efficient, handled through lawyers, so we didn't have to see each other again. I moved into a small studio across town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. And in the quiet of that space, something unexpected happened. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was free. Free from checking my phone and wondering who he was with. Free from shrinking my needs so he wouldn't feel accused. Free from being told that caring too much was a flaw. Hannah told me last week that she'd heard through mutual friends that Ethan was officially dating Lena now. Apparently, they'd been talking for about 2 months before that weekend. Funny how timelines have a way of telling the truth when people won't. My sister asked me if I regretted moving out so abruptly. If I should have tried harder. Try harder to do what? I asked. Work through his lying? She didn't argue after that. Yesterday, I got a text from a new number. I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted. I didn't respond. But if I had, I would have said this. You're right. I can do whatever I want. And what I want is a life without someone who sees my love as a burden and my trust as something to exploit. The apartment was easier to leave than the relationship. Because when you take everything that's yours and leave behind everything that isn't, the division becomes painfully clear. I took my self-respect with me. That was the most important thing I packed.